I'm a sports science who studies physiology, biomechanics, and mainly genetics applied to sports. The recent calls Genetics and Sports Performance. It was released by the Springer. And we are talking about how can we help other people to understand how genetics can be applied on day-by-day training. Because everything that we used to read on scientific papers, it was not exactly the same, the things that we were doing at the time. And so we decided to propose this book and to give an overview of what we are doing in terms of individualized training, nutrition, recovery, and how do we see the influence of genetics in adaptation, recovery, in training, and in individual sports and team sports. And all of this is condensed in this book. So it's basically the real experience of real scientists and physicians and nutritionists that work with genetics. We had a strategy to look the maximum sports sales we could on this point. So every athlete, every team that was willing to know how to apply genetics and contact us, we went there and started to talk to them to understand what was their needs and how we could help them to achieve the better performance. So we have experience with individual sports as, for example, open water marathon, with track and field, with football, with tennis, more recent, also with beach tennis and several other sports.
This book, is it for professionals? Is it for everyone?
It's a book for everyone, but that's how I would like to see this book. But in fact, it's not for everyone, because it's a book that was written to talk to physicians, physical coaches, and scientists, and especially those who are working with sports, and especially sports performance. But if you are first year class a sports science university, nutrition university, or also a physician, and you want to know, you like to know how genetics can be applied on sports, this is a book for you. There's not another way to describe it, because it's not the best book on the world. It's just a compendium of what people who work with that day by day can say to you for the most modern things and the most recent things that we apply based upon the scientific data that we have to the day.
So how does this work? Like if I want to have a personalized training, or if I want to know the effect of genetics on me or someone.
The first thing is to look for a competent lab that can run the test for you. And the test is one thing. You have the results. And another thing is to interpret these results. And that's the problem. The biggest problem is that. Also on scientific papers, we have this problem yet. That's one of the topics that we discuss in this book. What to do when we get the results from the genetic profile, let's call it this way, from an athlete or for a normal person that wants just to train better, to recover better, to live better. The second thing to do after you have the results is to find a good physician or a good sports scientist who knows how to transform that information in practice. And that's the biggest issue right now. That's the gap from translating the scientific to practice. That's the gap that we have right now in genetics.
So this first step to go to a laboratory and to know more about one's DNA profiles, is it possible to do it for everyone? Or how much
very, very possible for everyone. Just to have an idea, the first genome, the Genome Project, Human Genome Project, the first genome we sequence cost us, if I am not wrong, about $1 billion. So it was $1 for each nucleotide. Now, the last time I checked, if I'm not wrong, you can do the whole genome for less than $1,000. So yes, if you think that you only have to do once in your life because your genes won't change, it's not a bad investment.
Is it from blood?
How we did it was from the inside of the mucus with a swab, the buccal swab that we rub it on the cheek from the inside, and we get the epithelial tissue, and from there we have all the DNA.
And so if you have someone and you have the DNA profile and you want to have a personalized training, how big is the difference when you don't know the profile and you don't do anything personalized? Like, will it improve very much the results, the performance? Is it a small detail that is important?
Let's say
professional training?
I work as a trainer for almost 20 years. And only recently I start to use genetics information to train my athletes and my clients, normal clients. So it's very possible to train anyone without this information. What is the catch? Why is it so important to know that? Because this is, we used to say that it is the future, but it's right now. We have already access to this information. So what is the big deal? Let's say that training was always been, and for some time it's still gonna be, trial and error. So I can study the best ways to train a person, an athlete, from the specific discipline. But let's say that my athlete doesn't respond as fast as I want, or doesn't respond at all. So 3 months later, when I'm going to reevaluate all the things that we've done, and I perceive that my athlete is not improving his performance. So what do I have to do? I have to try again, to try a different perspective of training, create something new, to adapt the training to that person, not knowing if I will succeed, because it can happen that 3 years after that, the same panorama is still there. But with the genetics information, we can shorten it's like a shortcut. I can, with that information and knowing my athlete, and that's this is not negotiable. I have to know the person. I have to understand how he works, what his background, what his plans, what he was doing. I have to know the whole panorama, the whole profile. So with those two things in hands, I can look at the genetics and say, okay, I know now why you are struggling to adapt it when we do this kind of training. Because your body does not respond, or there's a part of your metabolism that creates energy that does not respond to these stimulus. Or the response from that stimulus is much harder than if we go another way. And so we use this as a shortcut. There's less trials and less error, so I can improve performance as fast as I want, let's say.
Do you have examples of specific applications? Like we discussed about recovery. There are different ways to have that recovery,
Yes,
depending on the person.
there's one of the most famous genes that is linked to performance calls ACTN3. This gene is expressed a protein that is structural to our muscles. The Z lines, and that Z lines that connects the sarcomere. We have actin and myosin, and the ACT, the alpha-actinin, links the actinin filament to the Z line. And we have 2 types of alpha-actinin on our muscles fiber, alpha-actinin 2 and alpha-actinin 3. But alpha-actinin 3 is present only on fiber 2 types, especially on fiber 2X, 2Xs. And some people does not express ACTN3. So they have only ACTN2 or alpha-actinin 2. What's the difference between the 2 and the 3? The 3 is more resistance. It can suffer more from stresses until it breaks. So let's say that I have 2 athletes and I don't know their genetics, and they are training together to perform better in any sport. And after one session, a harder session or a longer session, one of those 2 athletes struggle to recover. So it feels more pain, or not pain, but a specific pain, but it feels more difficult to perform the next day, even if he doesn't have pain. So the performance the next day will be a little lower than expected, and the other athlete will be the same performance. After a week, after 2 weeks, after a month, one athlete will be training more than the other athlete. So that's one way to see recovery. there's a lot of genes linked to this. We do not look gene by gene. There was only an example to specify how we see the whole picture, but we do not see recovery, see performances based on one gene. This is madness.
Is there a relation also with the brain, with the neural activity? Do you take into account, I don't know, the
Yes.
brain or the mental activity of the athlete?
There's a study very, very interesting that it was run by one of the authors of this book. He was also Olympic athlete from 400 meters, if I'm not wrong. And he was studying the BDNF. And he saw that the BDNF was very, very much higher on athletes that have performed power sports for their whole lives compared to the athletes with endurance, for example. And we know now there's a variant for the BDNF, which says that some people produce more BDNF than others. And we saw a lot of things about BDNF, for example, the capacity of reading everything about the sports and the cognitive part of the sports. So imagine an athlete that produces less BDNF and do endurance sports compared to the same variant on an athlete who does power sports. So even if you do a variant that produces lower quantity of BDNF, that athlete that does more power sports will produce more BDNF. So imagine if I know that and I know what is the variant of my athlete, and let's say that he does endurance sports, and I want to increase the level of BDNF to doesn't matter why for now, but let's say that I want to increase the express of BDNF. So I start to study and saw that if I perform more power training, he will be increases the BDNF. But again, let's link to the other gene that I was speaking a little while, the ACTN3. I don't know that athlete, the specific athlete, does not express ACTN3, but I'm interested to increase the level of BDNF. So what I will do, I will increase the quantity of high intensity training because that will increase the production of BDNF. What happens with that athlete? He will probably injure because the ACTN3 is not there. So when we start to connect the puzzles and say, okay, I have this one that is connected to the brain that I want to improve, but how do I do that? What's the big picture? So that's how we colligate. We link nutrition, we link the psychology, we link the physiology, and link the biomechanics to a whole. BDNF is a brain-derived neurofactor that is linked to the neuroplasticity. So neuroplasticity is not only cognition, but also the capacity of activate more muscles and to create more synergy from activations and from the neural system to the muscle system, for example. Also, this is a neuroplasticity. So if I can improve neuroplasticity, I can improve the performance for my athlete.
So there is a direct relation with the brain in neuroplasticity and the performance, even in sports that are like not really complex.
Yes, it's funny that you mentioned because right now I focus on a study with that purpose. We are studying how imagining, if I imagine that I'm running and after that I'm going to run, how that can improve my biomechanics, for example, or my resilience from fatigue. And this is linked to the fact that when I am imagining, I am creating the same neural pathways that if I was really performing the sport. And I am starting to create a good environment to improve neuroplasticity. And so I improve my performance a little faster if I do not imagine, if I do not use this technique. So yes, it's linked. A lot of athletes use it. I don't know if every one of them knows that is a technique that you can use with certain rules to improve the imagination. But a lot of athletes, if not every athlete, use this when he's training or when he's off training, and he's remember of what he's done, on what he did, and how can I do that better the next time? Why did I was wrong on, let's say, on tennis? Why did I not predict that the play the other tennis player was about to do? Because I was looking for his bar movements, and it was kind of obvious what he was going to do. So if I imagine for the next time when I saw that patterns, maybe I will be more prepared to respond for his action. So yes, it's a very potent, very powerful technique that we can use.
And you are using genetics to personalize the training of athletes. And one of the questions people have is also to know what are the personal limitations of someone due to their genetics. Like, are they not good at all in a sport because of their, their body? Do you see this kind of limits?
Let's say that genetics is not destiny. Genetics is not fate. It's not about limits. It's about libertation. Let's say it's about how can I do it better? Everything that I want. So if I want to be a runner, and you present me my genetics, I will say, okay, you can be a runner, and the best way to do it is training this way. Is when I say this way, there's not only one way, but it's just to say, I can help you if we go from here. But let's say that after 1 or 2 years, I say, no, I don't no longer want to be a runner. Now I like to surf. Okay, so let's understand how surf works. What is the competencies? What makes a good surfer? And let's create training strategy that is more adapted to your genetics. And that's the way we see genetics. We do not limit anyone. You'll never see me or another person of my group that is saying your genetics says that you do not have the conditions to play this sport, to run, to swim, to play tennis, to play football. There's not such a thing like that.
And I think you studied also the effect on high altitude acclimatization. Can you talk a bit about that?
That's funny because that was the way that genetics was presented to me. In 2012, I was climbing Kilimanjaro with another 2 friends. And one of those 2 friends, when we reached about 4,500 meters, he started to feel sick, nauseous and headaches, and decided to go down. Me and the other guy, we continued without feeling nothing. And we reached the top of Kilimanjaro 2 days later. When we go back to Brazil, I start to wonder what was happening. 'Cause I didn't feel anything. Why was he so sick? He was very sick. And I start to wonder that our structure, our body structure was different. If you saw me and the other guy from behind, you see the same person. But the other guy, he had more muscle mass that we did. Also the legs was bigger. And I start to realize that it may be something about the muscle fiber types, characters, distribution. And so I started to study, and I saw that there was a link between BMI and acute mountain sickness. The people that have higher BMI are more predisposed are more probability to develop the acute mountain sickness. And I continued to study, and I saw another scientific paper that says that people with higher BMI had a higher quantity of fiber type 2, especially 2X. And when I continue to study, and I read to genetics, and I get to know the ACTN3 gene that I spoke a little while, he says that people who express ACTN3 had more probability to have more muscle fiber types 2X. And then I link all those information, and I talked to a professor on University, the Federal University in São Paulo. He said, what do you think? ACT entry can be a predict factor for acute mountain sickness? And he told me, I don't know. Let's see. Let's try. So we studied the influence of this gene on exactly 4,500 meters for 6 hours. We put the people inside a normal body camera. We induce the high altitude of 4,500 meters, and we saw that yes, it's a very there's an association. Let's say there's a higher probability to develop acute mountain sickness if you express ACTN3, and there's a lot of other genes that is linked to the acclimatization, but that was one that it was not. And even today, if you look several the recent papers that link acute mountain sickness, even with genetics, ACTN3 is not in the mainly genes that is linked. But it was a good hunch, and we could show that even at a muscle basis, we can explain a little bit about the acclimatization. And that is surprising to me, because from that point on, the first contact that I have with genetics, that we start to developing our own concept that you can never look at one gene to decide anything. So, okay, there's association between this gene and the phenotype. Okay, but that does not explain anything. It's just an association. In how can I use this information? I cannot use. I have to get more information. So if I can see the whole picture, I can decide what to do. Otherwise, it's just an association. It can be casual or it can be real.
We talked about visualization and how you found that it can help the performance. Did you study other tips or techniques that can be useful to improve oneself in endurance?
I believe that the greatest tip that I can do is not about genetics. It's about consistency. To improve in sports, any sports, you have to be consistent. When we talk about endurance, for example, we have a classic study, the Heritage Family Study from Claude Bouchard, and they show us that Vo2 Max, for example, is almost 50% determine the maximum oxygen consumption that we have. It's a parameter of endurance that we use to see if the athlete have a higher capacity in endurance. Okay, we only endurance we used to look at three variables that is the main important: VO2 max, or the higher consumption of oxygen; the lactate threshold, which is the let's say that is the device of aerobic and anaerobic zones, and also the movement economy of the running economy, which means how can I go faster and spending less energy. So that's the three pillars that we have in endurance. So imagine that we have this study that says the VO2 max is almost 50% determined by genetics. So what does that mean? Not so much, because we have another 50% to develop. And how we develop this other 50%? With training hard and training well, with nutrition. And also nutrition has a great genetic link that you could improve. And recovery. So there's not such a limit to say, okay, if I do not have the right genes, so I lose this 50%, I can no longer be a good runner. No, because I don't know what are the genes composition to reach this 50% genetics determined. I don't know if there's a right combination of polymorphisms to say with this combination, you are going to be a real good endurance athlete. We do not have these answers yet, and I think we will never have, because there's a project that we are finalized finalizing, and we are seeing that we study about 50 to 60 endurance athletes, the high level, and we look at their genomic profile, and we look at their physiological variables and VO2 and thresholds, and we try to connect those 2 points, and we saw that there's several pathways, different genomic pathways to reach high performance. So, okay, almost 50% of the Vo2 Max can be genetically determined, but it doesn't mean that there's only one profile to meet this 50%. And that's the beauty of the thing. So what's the biggest tip that I can do for a beginner or an athlete that's struggling and is trying to think about how he can improve it? It's consistency. Surround yourself of good professionals, physicians, nutritionists, coaches, and other athletes, good athletes that can help you seek for improvement in every area, and do not stop to train.
Regarding nutrition, what did you see? Like, how can we personalize it?
Well, that's not exactly my area, but I work with some nutritionists, and what we can see is there's several polymorphisms. There's link, associated with the way that our body can digest, to say, and to serve the nutritions for our body. So we can accelerate the energy process, the energy metabolisms with the right nutrients for those people. So depending on the genetic characteristics, if we do not respect them, maybe it's like training. It's like I was saying before about training, trials and errors. I can try to do the best diet for my athlete based on the latest recommendations, and my athlete may not respond as well because his genetics can be different from that recommendation. So it's not complicated, but we need to talk to a more specialist person on this issue.
And do you have in mind a specific use case? Like when you improved the performance of someone using specific adaptations?
We recently published a case study about a swimmer, an open marathon swimmer, and he had 6 months until the trial for the World Cup, and he had just lost the last trial, and he called us and said, I have to improve my performance in the next 6 months to try to go to the World Cup. And we have already worked together 3-4 years before that. So it's like I was saying, for the genetics is just a part. We have to know the athlete. So we knew the athlete already. And I told him, okay, but as I am in Italy and you're not here, to improve your chances, I would like you to perform a genetic test so I can have more information to help you in this short time. And he did, and we took his genetic profile, and we saw something that was very, very interesting. He had a profile that when he performed the high intensity train, he loved it. He get out of the pool smiling. That was a good training. He goes to the maximum. Okay, but we saw that the adaptation of that stimulus, it was almost nothing. He would need to perform several of that stimulus to have an improvement, a little improvement. And we saw that if we did the opposite, let's focus on the higher volume trains. And he hated to do it. And he hated because his body won't respond at the session, during the session, won't respond well. He had a genetic characteristic to perform more powerful than endurance. But he had a genetic characteristic that could adapt it more easily to that stimulus. So that's what we did together with his staff. So let's improve the quantity of higher volume training for this athlete, even if he doesn't like, because maybe the performance will improve much faster than we are expecting. And 6 months later, he won the Brazilian Championship and classified to the World Championship. And he goes to the first World Championship of his life, and he ended top 30 of the world. So all of this in less than 1 year for an athlete that had never been on the World Championship before. And he was training for 10 years. So that's the biggest case that we have.
And do you know some misconceptions, bad advice, or ideas that people might have?
One of these misconceptions is that the one that we talk about here, about the limits of genetics. So can I use genetics to predict performance? No. Can I use genetics to choose a better sport to do? No. Can I use genetics to... genetics is mandatory. Genetics define champions. No. Can I use one gene to improve the performance of my athlete? I would say you can try, because it's more information that we had before, but it's not a complete is not a complete action. Let's say you can use the information of one gene, but that information alone, I don't know if it will help you much more than if you do not have this information. There's another thing that we already talked about, scientific papers, and there's a concept that there is a score. People used to try to predict a score of genes that can be related to athletic performance. How do they do that? Imagine if I took all of the athletes that runs 100 meters, and I can see the genetic profile of all of them, and then I initiate to give points for the kind of genotypes that they have. Okay, gene 1, this genotype is more association with power sports, so I will give 1 point for this one. And the other genotype that is not linked to power sport, I will put 0. And then I try to add genes, and in the end, I have a score. And I get that score, and I get, for example, Edward's genotype profile, and I analyze that, and I count your score. And I see that you have the same score, or your score is in the range of the athletes that run 100 meters. And so I say, okay, Edward, you can be higher level athlete of 100 meters because you have the same score of those athletes. But I do not take into account what genes gave you that score. So let's say that ACT3, let's go back to ACT3. Let's say that 98% of those athletes express ACT3, and you do not, okay? But you express other genes. So the score that you have is about the same that they have. But you do not express a protein that gives you an advantage to train harder and to recover fast. So you may not reach the same level that those athletes. So that's a problem when we're trying to simplify something that is complex. Creating a score, putting all the genes on the same scale, this is something that we are trying to end. I think that we have to understand that genetics applied to sport is not something new, but is not known for a century. So every day we learn something new in sports in general and in genetics in general. So everything that we wrote, for example, in this book is based on the scientific information that we have right now in 2025, and that we apply on real athletes in the last 10 years. This book may not live forever. So when we talk about sports performance without genetics, we cannot close your eyes for the improvements that the area brings us every day. When we put genetics inside this world, we have to be very, very cautious because we don't know nothing yet. We are trying to translate the things that we have right now so far to the real world, but to improve decision making, to facilitate to create shortcuts to performance, and we are succeeding because there's a little information that is already consolidated. But we have to be very, very, very cautious about determinisms. That's the real word. We cannot be determinists. We cannot say genetics is this end point. We can have the open mind, or keep the open mind, to learn every single day and to be humble to say, okay, I thought that something was that way, and I see now that with the new information that is not like that. So things can change, and we have to be open-minded to accept that and move forward. If you are starting, if you're a beginner, if you're in the early days of your career in sports, focus on exercise physiology. First, human physiology, and then exercise physiology. Know everything you can. And if you want to go inside the genetics, you have to know physiology, human physiology, and then exercise physiology. Because if you look at our book, you see that genetics appears only on the name of the genes. Because what we are talking about is the function of the protein that those genes express. And that function you can only understand if you know exercise physiology and human physiology.